Okay, good day, people. Hope everyone is doing well. I thought I'd respond here a little bit to some of the videos that have been going on regarding meaning. And some people are suggesting that, with the collapse of the religious worldview, there's just no meaning in the world anymore for people. Other people have said, well, you have to make your own meaning. Some people have said that, meaning is wholly subjective and that what's meaningful for one person isn't meaningful for another person. And there's a whole bunch of different opinions and views being expressed. I thought I'd sort of chime into that. Okay, so the first thing I would say is that the word meaning is ambiguous and it means at least three different things. Now, the first meaning of meaning is definition. That is, we say, what does a word mean? And, did that word mean what someone thought it meant? And that would be one of the meanings of meaning. There's another meaning for meaning, which is intention. That is, were you meaning to do that? Did someone mean to do that meaning? Did they intend to do it, right? And you can notice that sometimes it ambiguously slides between definition and intention. The third one, which is what I think most people are talking about, is significance or importance. And all three of those do kind of weave together, right? That there is, someone will say, that had a lot of meaning, or was that meaningful to you? And there is a sense in which meaning as definition and meaning as intention and meaning as significance are all embedded in the word meaning ambiguously. Sometimes one pops out to the, I guess, the downplay of the others, but in general, all three of those is there. Even when people try to talk about something like the meaningfulness, it still does have this question of how is that an equivalent to something that is meaning as definition is often synonymous with, that is equals to, right? And so I guess part of the problem would be to say, when people are talking about meaning, which of those three are they talking about, or could you even extract one and just focus on it? Well, I think they're largely talking about the last one, although you can't really extract it out from the others. Okay, that said, I don't think that meaning is wholly subjective, right? It's largely dependent upon culture and cultural values. Now, there is a sense, I would want to admit, that if you step back and you try to get outside of your culture's blinders and you try to have this kind of, God's eye view of things, and you try to understand what different meaning structures different peoples have had throughout history, it's very apparent that meaning can seem to be in the stuff, although it's largely a collective interpretation of it. Think of the meaning of tan skin as a very simple example, right? There was a certain time in a certain culture where tan skin was looked down upon and it was seen as an embarrassment, and it was something that one was not proud of. It meant that you were a laborer out in the sun. Whereas today, because so many people work indoors and they don't get that much vacation time, having a tan or tan skin now can seem to be, um, at least to a large number of people in modern Western world, it seems to be a sign of affluence or privilege, or it makes a person feel good about themselves. It has some sort of positive meaning. Now, that doesn't mean that it's subjective. It means that it's culturally articulated, and there are socioeconomic and historical and material conditions that help to serve the reason why certain meanings come, and I guess they deliver the sense of positive affect or negative affect that they do, right? If there's a deficit of meaning, I think, what I've tried to do, and this is going back at least 20 years, right? I've tried to create models for how people generate meaning, and I'm going to see if I can't share one real quickly here. And the argument would be that if a person wanted to generate meaning and create as much meaning as they can in their life, there are five different poles or five different intersecting lines that all come together and they articulate meaning. I'm going to see if I can't sort of walk through them. Okay, the first one is the actual goal that you're pursuing. So you have to have a goal in order to have some sort of meaning horizon, and the depth of the meaning or the intensity of the meaning is going to be in some way proportional to the actual goal that you have. So if it's a grand goal, it's an important goal, it's a goal that bears upon other people, the stakes of other people, the interests of other people, the larger the goal itself, the more possibilities for meaning in that person. Okay, that would be the first horizon. The second horizon would be how much suffering is the person willing to endure for that goal. So, I don't think we want to advocate suffering, but I guess we want to acknowledge it and say suffering is inevitable. To be human is to suffer. I mean, to be an organism is to suffer in some way. But humans can suffer in, I guess, profound ways of existential despair. They can suffer by way of alienation and deep depressing losses of love and all this kind of stuff. And I guess the point would be that the more that a person is able to contextualize their suffering, take the suffering that in some way is going to happen, whether one moves toward a goal or not, and purposefully use that suffering as a way to build in meaning for one's goals. That is, if you have to suffer anyway, suffer for some noble goals, something that makes that suffering seem worthwhile. Okay, that would be the second one. Now, the third, fourth, and fifth, I guess, they integrate into those first two, and the one is, or the third one has to do with the interplay of opposites, right? That opposites help to generate meaning. That is, the closer opposites are to one another, where one could go or the other could go, the more the horizons of meaning are intensified. That is, if it's a complete blowout where the opposites are in absolute dominance, one or the other, it's not very meaningful. Meaning comes out of a generation of oppositional forces back and forth, and the more that those forces get closer and closer to either one winning, the more intensity of meaning gets generated out of there. The fourth one would be is what is the line of past that is being used to contextualize this continuous goal that you're suffering for that has rises of oppositional forces? What is the past? What's the tradition? How long has this been going on? Where can one trace its roots? And then the last one is, to what extent does this bear into the future? How far does it reach into the future? So if you step back at it, it's really, what is the goal and who is potentially benefiting from that suffering for that goal? How close are oppositional forces in antagonism to one another? How far back can this be contextualized, and how far forward can it be contextualized? Now, if you take those 5 principles as a model, what I think you'll find is these are the basic ways that meaning gets systematically generated in modern Western culture. And I'll give you a couple of quick examples. The one most obvious example would be all athletic events. Go watch sporting events. This is what sporting events are really about. That you have teams on a field and they have some goal. And the goal is it's to win the game, but they keep ongoing records of the performance of the team over the seasons, and they tell how today's game is going to fit into the upcoming season and maybe establish them at a certain level. There's this whole historical backdrop for athletic events. There's also lots of stories. When you watch sports, there's lots of stories of how much suffering and hardship has been endured by the physically by the players for the game. And people, they somewhat celebrate watching players not in a senseless brutality or a stupid suffering, but in a willingness to try to achieve something very difficult. They're willing to sacrifice their body for a great athletic accomplishment or some rare achievement, and when they do so, it creates a kind of horizon of meaning. Now, you don't have to agree with it, but I think to say that there's no meaning being accomplished by that, I think people are just denying it. It would be very hard to explain why all this is going on. Okay, so you have this there are goals, they're set in larger contexts. Now, who actually is, I guess, being, um, for, for whom is the meaning being established? See, this is why it's so important to see these larger collectives as representatives or as people to whom the meaning can be, uh, I guess, attributed, or it can be accomplished and then done on their behalf. And so, for example, when sports teams play, the individual players not only wear the colors of their team and they wear uniforms, but the fans may wear the same colors, and they may engage in a larger sort of escalating hierarchies of collectives. So just take, for example, if it's like the Olympics, they'll may, it's not just an athlete's performance, it's that performance of an athlete, and they're performing on behalf of their country. Or when you take, a sports team in the US, they'll perform for their city, but then ultimately they play for their country. That's why the national anthem comes out at the beginning. And then um, it's each time the larger the collective that you're playing for. There's a difference between playing local ball, regional ball, national ball, and then sort of international, right? By the time you get up these international levels, they seem to be more meaningful, more significant. And then I guess, the most obvious one would be this interplay of opposites, that a meaningful game is a tight game. It's a close game. It's a game where it could go either way. It's when one team does a really great job and then the other team comes right back and you're not sure who's going to win. It really intensifies the meaning to it. Now, I guess maybe I'll end with one last example, which is I think Christianity has largely harnessed these structural elements into the dominant mythology of Christianity, right? And I've written extensively about this. Go check out a piece that I did many, many years ago called In the Becoming. See if I can find a link to it and post it to it. But it was like my master's thesis. And I mean, this was, early 90s. And, the if you take something like Christ dying on the cross, I'll just use that as an example, right? If you take Christ dying on the cross, well, what's going on here? Here is some person, and this is a story and it's a mythological image that draws upon all five of these meaning constructing tensions to create an ultimately meaningful story. I mean, the argument would be that it partly resonates with people and creates such horizons of meaning because it takes all five dimensions at its fullest extreme. So, what do you have? You have some person who is sacrificing himself, I mean, literally being tortured, demeaned, humiliated, and then crucified. So fully embracing suffering, but it's not just suffering for suffering's sake, it's suffering to save all of humanity. Arguably goes all the way back to Adam and Eve and goes back to the original sin of the very first people, and it goes all the way back to and it will reach forward all the way to the end of the world. And it's this, again, this narrative that reaches all the way to the past, all the way into the future, and it's an interplay of ultimate oppositions between eternal salvation and eternal damnation, with a suffering, again, done on behalf of all of humanity. The more that people could try to look for those five horizons, I think they would see that there is not an objective source of meaning. I think it's socially and culturally articulated, but to be modern and to be Western is to at least see these five dimensions as, these are possibilities that can be harnessed. You can see it in workplace design, you can see it in educational settings. To people who want to build meaning, there are ways to do it. Okay, thanks.